What if the most overlooked leadership skill is recognizing the talent sitting right in front of you at every age? Welcome back to UnCeiling You, Season 2, Part 2, where we're exposing the external barriers holding women back and challenging the systems that keep them in place. Last week, we took on physical exclusion, how safety gear, uniforms, and even pocket design weren't made for women. This week, we're tackling a more invisible, but just as dangerous barrier, the career timeline myth. Because let's be real, too old, too green, too late, too early, too much experience, not enough. We've all heard it. But what if the real problem isn't age, it's assumption? In this episode, we dive into the shadow threat of age bias and how it's quietly costing companies innovation, diversity of thought, and long-term talent sustainability. We'll explore the power of mutual mentoring and how cross-generational teams don't clash, they strengthen. And we'll introduce the idea of a longevity mindset, a future-focused way to build workplaces that work for all ages. This isn't just a conversation. It's a call to action for every listener who's ever felt invisible because of their birth year, and for every leader ready to design a better system. Because here, in this growing community of ambitious thinkers and bold builders, you belong. And your growth, it's right on time. Our guest this week is Sheila Callahan, founder of the Age Equity Alliance, a global strategist and changemaker with decades of experience helping organizations reimagine success through research, inclusive communication, and talent sustainability. She's part developer, part activator, and 100% about helping you build what's next with the team you already have. So download the episode now to listen anytime. And if it sparks something in you, share it. That ripple you're starting matters. UnCeiling You, because success has no expiration date. Let's dive in.
Thank you so much for being here. And just to get started, if your company has DEI, a DEI strategy, but isn't addressing age equity, you could be missing out on a huge opportunity because ageism is the most accepted biases in the workplace, and it quietly drains companies of innovation and productivity. The real question is, what happens when businesses start talking about age equity seriously? So here's my question. What does ageism look like in the workplace? If you can give us some examples. Why do you think age is so often left out of the DEI conversations? And what are some of the hidden costs of ignoring it?
So those are a lot of questions. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here with you, Natalie. So what does it look like? How does it show up in the workplace? Well, first of all, Age Equity Alliance is a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, based out of Texas, and working around the world to help organizations learn this very thing. How does it show across the age spectrum? And it's important to address ageism where it shows up, because you don't want it to become a cycle that repeats itself. So for example, very easy examples would be, it's very difficult for younger people to get into entry-level roles. I have a son who is a college senior, and he says the joke is that you have to graduate from college with 10 years of experience. So it's very, very hard. And if you think about it, if you're asking for someone to come into an entry-level role, chances are they don't need to have this kind of extensive experience. Either they have a basic understanding of what's needed to do the job, or it's a type of work that can be easily taught, the things that they need to do. And a lot of companies are doing that. They're bringing in younger people and then training them. And we see this when some companies are, for some positions, they no longer require, for example, an undergraduate degree. But that said, it is still extremely competitive. It's very difficult for fresh graduates to get those entry-level jobs because of these disclaimers about you need this many years of experience. Other side of the spectrum, there are jobs out there that say no more than X years of experience, which is the exact opposite kind of discrimination around age. And, this is because, for all kinds of reasons that people think older people do not want to remain engaged in the workforce. And they're all myths and they're all stereotypes. And I'm sure not going to go on a listing them now because I'd be here for a very, very long time. The difference between younger people experiencing age discrimination and older people experiencing age discrimination is that for younger people, they eventually age into that sweet spot. But for older individuals, once they kind of reach that certain age, which really, depending on the industry, it could be late 40s, mid 40s, but almost always across all industries, it's around 50. Then, and that's so problematic, really, because older workers still have so much to give. They want to be engaged in the workplace just like everyone else. And so I'm sorry, what were the other questions that you asked about?
Yeah, so what are some of the hidden costs of ignoring this age discrimination?
Right. I think the biggest hidden cost of ignoring age discrimination, well, let's see. I would say that there is the risk of litigation. And I hesitate to start with that because I don't want organizations to think I need to avoid this because I'm worried about lawsuits and litigation. But technically, as long as the EEOC is still around and still ensuring equity in the workplace, and age discrimination is certainly one of those protected categories. The other thing, the biggest thing though that they're missing out on is access to talent. And the talent pool is shrinking. Are living longer, this is true, but what we also have, Natalie, is this decades upon decades of decreased birth rates. So there's just not the same number of people coming up the ranks as there have been historically. And there are certainly reports that say that by 2030, which is only 5 years from now, that there could be an incredible gap in the number of jobs that our employers need to fill and the number of candidates available to fill them.
Well, that's definitely interesting. So what are some of the most surprising things that you've seen that companies discover when they finally start to recognize this and make a change?
I think one of the biggest ahas for organizations that do this is that they learn that different ages are not in different camps. And they, I call it clickbait. There's a lot of articles out there that say, there's this communication gap and younger people and older people don't like working with each other, but it's just clickbait because research has shown that actually younger and older people get a lot out of working from each other. So I think that's the biggest surprise that employers get is that there is this, they learn from each other that they actually have more in common with each other than they ever realized. Here's another interesting data point that's come out of research is that in organizations where there are mixed age groups, they find that there is less turnover with the younger groups. So they're actually staying longer. And so I find that that's a very interesting data point.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And I could see why that would happen because in a sense, you have two things happening. You have one group of people mentoring another group and the other person feeling like I have someone who has my back.
Exactly. There's so much to be said for mutual mentoring. I actually was in a mutual mentoring relationship many years ago when I was working in the pharmaceuticals. I was at the time, I want to say maybe late 30s, early 40s, and he was a fresh graduate. He was doing one of those rotations in our organization where they bring in these fresh graduates and they spend 6 months in one part of the company, 6 months in another part. And so we were paired together. What the benefit of that is that I was coaching him on how to get in front of executives, how to get that kind of executive level exposure. And what he was coaching me on was, why Twitter at the time, Twitter was an important thing, and so it was actually him who encouraged me to set up my Twitter account, and he sent me the first tweet and I sent him the first tweet. And that was a really big deal in 2011, I don't have it anymore. But I did actually use my Twitter account, to to do a lot of branding when I left the corporate world and was on my own and creating a coaching business and writing books. I had quite a few thousands of followers and but I gave that up.
Well, and I like that term mutual mentoring because it can go in both directions. So I could see how this really kind of shatters a stereotype and it can give a business real benefits because you get that longevity. Are there any other examples of how the mutual mentoring can give benefits to businesses?
I think that it doesn't matter really the age of individuals. Whenever you pair people together, then and they're working together, they're going to learn from each other. But I think that the biggest benefit between having younger and older people mutual mentoring in a mutual mentoring relationship is the fact that younger people are kind of learning their way. They're, for example, soft skills, learning the soft skills that older people have, quite well mastered. And just having institutional knowledge that extends over a historical perspective. I mean, that can have great value. And so those are some of the things I believe that younger people really value. There's a study that was produced by the organization, another nonprofit called Generation, and it was on AI. And it cited a study that was done by MIT that said that younger people use AI to kind of fill in the gaps that knowledge that older people have. And in fact, that's one reason why younger people are much more reliant on it than olders, is because they have a lot of catching up to do, right? And they're using it to help them do that. So I think, and then for the older individual, I just think it's always good whenever we can talk to younger people to have really deep and engaging dialogue with a younger person to understand what's important to them. What do they see in their future? Where do they want to go? And because we need to stay in touch, because we're not all the same, but age doesn't make us all different. There's commonalities across ages and there are differences within age groups. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's just very important that we understand from each other what's important in our lives, what our goals are. And especially with people living longer and working longer, that means, for younger people to understand that just because someone is 70 years old doesn't mean that they want to go, drink margaritas on the beach every day. And the other thing for older people to reflect on is that younger people, they're probably going to have to work their whole life. We're talking a 60, 70 year work life. And so what might that mean to that younger person? How does someone just starting out, think, oh man, I got 70 years, before I can, quote, I don't even use this R word anymore, retire. But, because everything is changing.
Yeah, I get that. Myself, I'm thinking about it. It's like, okay, what are my next few chapters going to look like? And I see that reality of, is that R word even possible? So how do I make it fun,
Right.
as fun as possible?
Yeah.
So companies that are winning in the long run aren't just hiring the best people. They're thinking in the long term about the workforce and exactly what you're talking about, a longevity mindset. And it isn't just about keeping employees longer. It's about tapping into talent in ways that competitors overlook. So how does adopting a longevity mindset change the way that companies attract, develop, and retain this talent?
Well, I think that first of all, that's an amazing question. But I think that the greatest value in employers embracing this longevity mindset is it means that they understand what the demographics are telling them. And so I'm going to back up a little bit. In 1987, a think tank called the Hudson Institute published a study. It was called Workforce 2000. That study outlined 6 key challenges that the U.S. economy would face and need to address in order to be competitive in a global economy in the 21st century. of those 6 key challenges, 4 of them were directly related to the workplace and workplace demographics. And the top challenge was the necessity of understanding how to manage an aging workplace. So this was in 1987. So all these years later, employers, they still are not thinking about the demographic trends. And so with a longevity mindset, you have to understand what talent sustainability means and how that is being impacted by trends. So it goes back to what I shared earlier about the fact that people are living longer and that there's the shrinking talent pool and that there's going to be talent gaps. And so when you understand that the talent sustainability depends on you proactively creating an age equitable workplace, then leaders are guaranteeing their sustainability. But so often what we see are organizations that are hiring in this, like I mentioned before, this kind of age sweet spot. So they want someone mid-20s to they might hire somebody up to 40, but that's kind of, getting toward the end. But if you think about it, that's like a 15-year age range. And if it's just not sustainable, companies cannot find all of their talent within a 15-year age range. And so what that means is that they need to understand what it takes to bring in talent across the age spectrum. What are workers looking for? What kind of development, upskilling, and reskilling do they need? What are their long-term goals? And we can't make assumptions about any of those things based on age, because everyone is an individual experiencing life and going through life in their own way. And part of adapting to this longevity mindset is realizing that employees need to have off-ramps and on-ramps, and off-ramps and on-ramps to allow them to step in and out of the workplace depending on the demands of their life or where they are in time. And so that's one of the beautiful things about a longevity mindset, is that there's much more fluidity and flexibility in the workplace, and a lot less judgment around, well, why were you not employed for the last 18 months? It's really about skills. What skills do you have? Not just tech skills or technical skills, but also soft skills. What work experiences have you had? What kind of learning and training are you interested in? Do you want to, develop in? And how does that fit with the need of the organization?
So we are speaking about what a company should do. And say you're a person that's interviewing for a position and you're on-ramping right now. You had to off-ramp to be a mom or to take care of mom. One of those, it doesn't matter. But you have skills, you have talent, you've produced results in both your personal life and your work life. How would you speak to a company during that interview process when you're going on that on-ramp? Like, say they ask the question, tell me about this gap. How would you recommend that a person speak to that question?
Well, it depends. It depends. If a person is desperate for a job and they just really need a job, then I would answer it one way. But if the person was really interviewing the company, then I would see that as a red flag. So it would depend. I think that generally you can always find something positive to say about your time away. I think that honesty is the best policy. And there are a lot of reasons why people have job gaps. Maybe they're trying an entrepreneurial dream, they're playing with that idea. Maybe they take 5 years off and they do that. Maybe they take a year off to travel. Maybe they do take a year off to be home with their child. There's so many different reasons. And so I think the best way that an employee can respond to that is to say, without shame, well, I decided that I wanted to do this, or that I needed to do this, and I'm grateful I did because blah, blah, blah. This is what I learned. I'm back, I'm refreshed, and I'm ready to go. So really, you don't focus on it, other than just saying, this is what I did. I'm grateful I did it. This is what I learned, and I'm here, I'm recharged, I'm ready to go.
Awesome. I love that. So you made the case that, this timeline that we have in our head, or that society has, or that we think of, you start off strong in your 20s, peak in your 40s, and step aside in your 60s, is totally outdated. And so it's completely outdated. And more people are proving that success has no expiration date. In addition to you, I've interviewed other people that are starting new things in their 70s, and they're encouraging other people to do it. It's just really wonderful to see. And so how can people in general, in their mindsets, really break free from this outdated career timeline and take control of their journeys at any age?
That's another wonderful question. I've heard it described in different ways. We all know that the career path is no longer linear. I've heard it described as a squiggly career path, which I'm not really sure how I feel about that terminology. But I've already said on ramps and off ramps, and so that's one way to look at it. I've heard it described as, you're floating down a raft and you're floating down the river. And, sometimes you go over to the side and you get out for a little bit and then you get back in. So there are all kinds of ways to describe it. But I think in terms of taking control or coming to terms with it is just to think about each work experience as a project. This is a project. This is what I'm going to learn in this project. This is what I want to learn with that project, and understand oneself enough to know, where do you want to grow? How do you want to grow? And the other interesting thing about this new paradigm about working for many more decades is that you have an opportunity to do a lot of different things. This is one of my favorite things. When I was growing up, the adults would say, Sheila, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, depending on, the time, I'd say, well, I want to be a veterinarian. I want to be a writer, but I would never say more than one thing at a time. It would be, could only be one thing at a time. But nowadays, we can ask young people, what are all the things that you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea, because it's almost like you're on this journey, and this particular road you're this, then you come to a crossroads and you have a choice. Well, I can go in that direction or this direction. So it's more of a journey of different experiences. And I love the idea of thinking in terms of projects, because even when you're in an organization for a lot of years, you might be working on one team and then move over to another team. So it's a different type of project. So it's more like, okay, what's my next project? What would I love to explore next?
That's true. And I think, even in my own experience, when I think back, to me, 5 years is a good time. After 5 years, I'm really ready to do something different. And I think, we all have different timelines. Some of us might be comfortable longer, and some of us might be, get antsy sooner. And that's okay, because we're all different. So it really is about understanding ourselves and what we're looking for. And from the employer perspective, it's about understanding that everybody's different, and the best way to attract and retain talent is to know what they're looking for, what kind of experiences they want to have. Because if you know that someone wants to have three different kinds of experiences in the next 10 years, if you want to keep them, then you need to proactively help them figure out how they can do all of that with your company.
And I also love the fact, that what we're doing is we're encouraging companies, bosses, managers to ask the question, what is it that you want? Because sometimes we can keep our heads down and we never really ask ourselves that question. So taking the time to ask, what do you want? What would you love to have happen is such a powerful question.
Right. And I think, women are not always as good about voicing, what they really want without being asked. And so I have always been a big believer in surveying your employees to get these important insights in terms of, the gaps that might be that an employer might not realize that there are in the workplace, but when you survey your employees, they inform you through those insights where the gaps are. And then you already know what your strategy, you just have to develop a strategy around filling those gaps.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So we've covered a lot of information today and good insights about how people can work collaboratively across different generations, different groups. And we know that knowledge isn't enough. We talked about what to do, but it's action that drives change. And so my question for you is, my listener wants to make a real impact in their workplace. Where should they start? How can they make a difference in their workplace right now for age equity?
So just to clarify, are we talking about an individual, like an employee, or we're talking about the employer perspective?
Let's say the employee, and then let's say the employer.
Okay, good. So I think for employees, it's very important for employees to recognize when age bias and stereotypes becomes a part of the conversation, because it is so deeply embedded in the fabric of our culture, our external culture, and whatever is in the external culture gets brought into the workplace, that people don't realize when they make references about age. It's so embedded. And so it's very important to, for example, if someone makes a comment about, well, I don't know if I'm going to consider Natalie for that role because I don't think, that she has enough experience under her belt, and then the person can question, well, what do you mean by that? What does that mean exactly? Or I'm not going to hire Sheila because I just think she's too close to retirement. Well, wait a minute, where's that assumption coming from? And so we need to have people who recognize it and who ask the questions and get people to realize that they're making assumptions about individuals based on their age, how long they've been in the workplace, period, either not long enough or too long. So I think that that's one of the best things that they can do is just recognize it and ask questions to challenge it, because education is the first step in creating change. For employers, they just need to be smart. I think the biggest pressing aspect of being mindful around age equity, again, goes back to the whole issue around talent sustainability and the fact that employers are going to be scrapping for talent. And if they want to be competitive, if they want to be able to attract and retain employees, they have to have a workplace that feels inclusive, where people, where they see people who look like them across the age spectrum. I have this story I like to tell, and I call it the shadow threat of ageism. And this is a true story. I spoke to a young engineer in a tech company, and he was maybe 32, 33, something like that. And he relayed to me this conversation he'd had with his manager, who was late 30s. And the manager was telling him that he was saving all the money he could possibly save. And he was encouraging this younger employee to do the same, his younger team member. You should really be saving. He said, well, why is this so important to you? And he says, well, because I'm almost 40. And in this industry, that's old. So it didn't have anything to do with him, the fact that he was considered a fantastic manager, that his team was incredibly productive and contributed to the business, that they were all always upskilling and reskilling and doing all of those things. And so it didn't have anything to do with that. It had to do with the fact that of his age, right? Mm-hmm. What that did in that very moment was it created fear in the younger employee, because he's like, oh my gosh, I've only got 8 years left before this. So he's all of a sudden, instead of enjoying his work, he's thinking about, okay, do I need to go somewhere else to make more money faster? So companies need to understand the messages that they're sending their employees without even realizing it. And one of them. So another example would be if they're hiring for a position, what does the talent pool look like? Is everyone under 30? Mm-hmm. What message is that sending? Yeah. So companies just need to be cognizant of the messages they're sending. What do the faces look like on their website? What kind of language do they use in internal and external communications? All of these things send messages to their employees to tell them what they can expect in the future.
So leaders, HR leaders, leaders that are listening to this podcast that I'm sure they discovered, especially with that story, some kind of aha, like, wait, I can get a better tool if I'm a little bit more conscientious of this, and they might want to get a hold of you. What's the best way for them to reach you?
Gosh, well, I would love for people to reach me. Yeah, there is a contact button on the website, and the website is ageequityalliance.org.
Mm-hmm.
And you can contact me there.
Fantastic. Anything else you want to provide the listeners as a wrap up, something that they should really take away from this conversation?
So I think that, again, leaders really need to be aware of the importance of a longevity mindset and recognizing that the aging population is actually a viable talent pool. Age Equity Alliance have developed a new tool. We spent most of last year working on it. It's called the Longevity Mindset Index. And this index measures employee perceptions, and it gives leaders insights that help them create a solid foundation and creating a best-in-class workplace for all ages. And the index tool we have 5 key longevity mindset indicators, and that is perceptions around age at work, the overall workplace culture, the ongoing development, upskilling, and reskilling, and the perception of the ability to pursue purpose and passion. And then finally, and this is very, very important, the financial literacy and security that people feel across all the ages. And so these insights really, like I said before, when it comes to employee survey tools, these insights can give leaders, HR leaders, everything they need to create a successful strategy for retaining the key talent.
Excellent. That's a fantastic tool. And so in the show notes, we'll make sure that we have a link to your website so that they can find this tool and also find your connect button. Sheila, thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it. I think this is an important conversation, and I look forward to it getting out there.
Natalie, thank you for having me.
Before we close, let's pause and anchor what we just heard. Sheila challenged one of the most outdated beliefs in the workplace, that we peak in our 40s and quietly exit by our 60s. She reminded us that success has no expiration date and that the future of work depends on a longevity mindset, one that welcomes multiple chapters, off-ramps, and on-ramps throughout our careers. She laid bare the structural ageism baked into hiring practices and DEI strategies, and showed us what happens when organizations begin to take age equity seriously. But identifying external barriers is only half the story. Next week, we turn inward. Mozella Perry-Adamaluyi picks up right where Sheila left off, offering not just inspiration, but a roadmap. If you've ever felt like you're pushing uphill, burning out, or questioning your next step, this episode is for you. Mozella shares the internal tools you need to stay grounded and motivated when the external challenges don't let up. You'll learn how to manage your energy with intention shift from push to power and apply her 3H method, head, heart, and hands, to realign your mindset and momentum in everyday moments. She'll show you how to stop white-knuckling your way through success and start climbing with confidence, clarity, and sustainability. So, if Sheila's episode made you rethink the system, Mozella's will help you reset your center and rise on your own terms. Download today's episode if you haven't already. Downloads are how sponsors measure impact, and they help keep this podcast sustainable so I can keep showing up for you. Share this episode with someone who might be navigating their own career crossroad. The more we spread these conversations, the more we unceiling each other. You can listen anytime, on your walk, in your car, or while doing dishes. And when you do, just remember, this journey we're on, you're not climbing it alone. Until next time.